I am genderqueer, but I didn't always know that. I moved here about 3 years ago to Raleigh from Maine with my partner to start a graduate program. And that was a really big move for me, not just because geographically it was quite far, but also because I grew up in New England. I moved back there after college, and it was the first time I was going to be moving far away from the people who had watched me grow up. And that was a little sad, but also kind of exhilarating. And I also was really excited to be moving here to start graduate school. I did an MFA in fiction writing. And for an MFA in fiction, you traditionally have a couple of options for your thesis. One is you can write a collection of short stories, or you can write a novel. And I decided to write a novel about Sawyer, who is a 13-year-old queer girl struggling with her sexuality while growing up in a small, primarily white, straight New England town, which was an experience I related to a lot. And in order to cope with this, Sawyer becomes obsessed with this local legend of a witch who lived in the woods of her hometown in the 1800s and who cut off her hair with a knife, and who was supposedly very into women and herbal medicine, and who was run out of town for these reasons. And Sawyer becomes very obsessed with the witch, and I also became very obsessed with this local legend. And about halfway through the book, Sawyer cuts off her hair in imitation of the witch. And I finished my first draft, finished my second draft, graduated, and then in August of 2020, I also cut most of my hair off. It was down to my waist, and I cut it right up to my chin. And I didn't even think about the parallels of that until my advisor said, "Have you noticed that you did this thing that all the women in your book did?" And I said, "No, I had not noticed that, but I am really thinking about that a lot now." And having short hair was very liberating in that our culture assigns a lot of feminine and womanly qualities to having long hair, and I didn't have to deal with that. And it was also just like lighter weight and easier to take care of. But it was also very weird because I figured out pretty quickly that I really love having very long hair. I like the way it feels against my skin. I like being able to braid it and braid things into it and watch tutorials about how to have hairstyles like Game of Thrones characters. And I missed that a lot pretty quickly, and that surprised me. Not because I didn't miss it because it was a womanly thing. I just missed it because it was something that I liked about how I take care of my body. And I graduated right into the pandemic, May of 2020. And that was a spectacular time for introspection and being alone in my house with all of my many thoughts about myself and where I was going with my life. And um, I also had gone from being a TA, like a classroom teacher and a student at NC State, where I was seen in front of a classroom and as a student in a classroom all day long, most days. And so that was a really big switch to go from being seen by lots and lots of people in various roles to being seen by almost nobody, just my partner who I live with and our various animals that live with us. And that was super strange. And it left me with a lot of thoughts and queries about what it is like to see and be seen and how to present yourself and how that feels. And I started to take pictures of myself to kind of experiment with that. Also, just to be seen in some way. I had a real longing for that. I think a lot of us did. In the privilege and isolation of working from home. And I took a few different kinds of pictures of myself. The first, I kind of have categorized them in my brain. And the first one was that I watched the TV show Euphoria, which is a TV show about teenagers going through very dramatic, extremely emotional things while wearing really beautiful eyeshadow. And I got really into eyeshadow and bought a lot of it and started playing with it and would have these big pink and green clouds of eyeshadow around my eyes. And I liked that. And then I also would take pictures of myself in different outfits, um, outfits that I might not have felt quite so confident wearing out and about had I been going to the same places that I was used to going. And I have a picture of myself. I had gone out to rake my yard and I was wearing jeans and a button down shirt and a tweed vest. And I thought, this is kind of a whole look. So I took a picture of it and I looked at it and I thought, this is my bachelor farmer look. And that was just the thought that popped into my head. And for context, when I think of a bachelor farmer, I think of like Ireland in the 1800s. If you were unmarried and a man, you had a farm that you would just farm alone in a three-piece tweed suit all day long. And I have a picture of myself on my porch in a rocking chair in a plaid, big collared kind of 30s style dress. That was a whole different look that I also liked. And then a friend of mine and I went to a cabin outside Asheville for a weekend, and we had both been feeling, some of the low self-esteem that came with quarantine, and had been longing to like feel good about ourselves. So we did a photo shoot, and there were two parts to it. We did a lingerie photo shoot, and I have pictures of myself in black lingerie with like big brown work boots on, and I really liked that ensemble. And then I also have pictures of myself. We did a fancy outfit photo shoot because no one had any places to wear their fancy clothes. And I have this picture of myself in this kind of poofy cupcake dress with Doc Martens on. I liked those a lot. And around this time, I started to understand inside myself that I liked the pronouns she and her, and that they weren't the full picture for me. And I had witnessed some of my friends and people in my life starting to experiment or completely change their gender pronouns, and felt that there was something there for me, but didn't know what the whole deal was. So I just kind of let that percolate. And the only other thing that I was really taking pictures of consistently at this time, aside from myself and my pets, was nature and my yard and the places where I would go for hikes and the natural world around me. And this is very much tied into my witchcraft. I've been a witch for several years, and it's a very nature-based practice for me. I make herbal teas and medicines. I spend a lot of time outside alone in the woods. And a lot of my spellcraft comes from natural sources. And I had realized that it was in those places, in the woods, in my yard, that I felt the most comfortable with this sort of gender identity shift that was happening for me. Because in the woods and around trees, which I consider my companions and friends, I did not need to define my gender in any particular way because trees aren't particularly worried about that, and they don't have genders themselves. So I just kind of felt like one tree in a bunch of trees. And that was very comfortable for me. And around this time, my witchcraft partner and I started celebrating the Wheel of the Year holidays, which are the traditional pagan holidays of the equinoxes and the solstices, and any other holiday marking the cycle of planting and harvest, or just the cycles of the seasons. And the first one that we celebrated together was the autumnal equinox of 2020. And we did this spell where you take an apple and you carve into the skin of the apple all of the things that have been forbidden from you and all of the things that you have forbidden yourself from having. And I think I used a tack to do it. You carve in all these words and then you eat the apple. And that was the spell that we did. And I knew that I figured out that I wanted to use she and her pronouns. I wanted to keep those, but I also wanted to use they and them pronouns. I like to switch between the two. I like to be referred to as both, a bit of both. And that was pretty clear to me at this time. And I also knew that I was the only person that was clear to. I think my partner probably had an inkling of it as well, but I had not told anyone in my life, like any of my loved ones, that this was something that I wanted and that I am. And I'm usually a very external and verbal processor, so that was unusual for me to be at this spot of having something extremely important to share and not having shared it at all. So I knew I would have to do something to communicate this to people in my life, because I wanted my friends and loved ones to know this about me and to reflect it back to me. And so I made an Instagram post, and I wrote this whole long paragraph about how, for me, my gender identity is very tied into my witchcraft. It's very tied into the natural world and the elements of earth, air, fire, and water that I work with all the time and feel very physically connected to. And that, because of that, I use she and they pronouns. And I used one of the pictures of myself in the cupcake dress with the Doc Martens on. And I received a lot of very loving and supportive feedback from the people in my life who saw it. And I had to come out into the world in that way. I'm still in that process, but that was the starting point. And it was really the move down here and the privilege and isolation of quarantine and all of that time with myself that allowed me to figure these things out about myself. And like cutting my hair, I didn't plan it. I just followed what felt right. Thank you.